So the online co-op for Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles Remake is a little bit confusing. Here's how it works. The game world is divided into areas, each with towns and with dungeons. Normally you would drive your caravan around, physically going from marker to marker in order to access them. But now instead you can just literally open up a menu and access them. If you want to play with friends, you can open up the menu, set up which area you want to visit, set up the number of players or whether the match is public, and invite specific friends in, using the friend code system to add friends. So you've got one 12-digit code, and that's pretty much your permanent ID. But if you don't want to give that out, there's an option to create a temporary 6-digit ID. And you just hand it out. It's only good for one time or up to 30 minutes. Then from there you add your friend, and then they got to give you their ID if you want to add them. And all it's used for is really just to keep track of friends. You don't actually use the party system within the PlayStation 4 architecture. So whenever you go into a level, the game basically treats it like its own online match. It has its own unique ID, and if you have that ID, theoretically anybody can jump in at any time. And your friends who follow you can just look up your profile and see that you're in a match and jump into it. When you finish the match, however, you have to disband it. Otherwise, you'll just rerun the level again. Yes, the game will actually spit you back into the same level again, with anyone else who agreed to run it again. I'm assuming this is because there are artifacts that you want to collect that will buff your characters, and also there are places where you want to change the element of your stream. So if you missed it, you might want to go back in again, and this is the easiest way to do it because either you accept and go back in, or you cancel and go back to your own game. Then once you're back out in your own game without your party members, you'll have to repeat the process over again, creating a match and inviting your friends all in. You do not need to actually travel to the icon where the dungeon or the town is located. You can just open up the menu and hit Set Out Together. And then this will open up the menu for you to select the level and to invite your friends. This seems counterintuitive, especially since most games you create a party and everybody goes together. But there's a reason why it's set up this way, and it's actually quite genius. Square Enix did this complete jerry-rigging of this game in order to make it co-opable online. Remember, this is an old game, like over 15 years old. Technology and game design was completely different back then. There were certain concepts or certain things that you could expect from players that you just can't now. One of them being patience, and the patience to struggle and figure things out on their own. So if you want to progress in the game, you gotta keep going, you gotta keep tackling dungeons, keep collecting these drops in your chalice. What's particularly fantastic about this game is that there's a demo mode. Anybody can download this demo mode and pretty much play the entire game, provided they're playing with somebody who owns it. They're capped in their individual game. I think they can play the first 3 dungeons or like the first area, and then they can't continue. But through the invite system, they can always be invited into other people's games. So if I'm on one of the further dungeons, they can jump in with me. So there's a complaint going around that when you finish a dungeon, you collect a drop of myrrh for your chalice. So only the host, or as I said before, the person who creates the match, gets credit for that drop. So essentially, if you're running with a party of 4, you need to run that dungeon 3 more times with the other people hosting individually, so they can get credit in their own games for collecting that drop. Now this seems like a huge blunder by Square Enix, but I'm going to explain now why I think it's completely understandable why it's set up this way. So first of all, it does suck if there are 4 people who all purchase the game, who just want to play together, and run through the entire game together, but for each of them to get credit, they have to run it, basically the game 4 times. But the reason why it's set up this way is because the game is addressing the original biggest problem of Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles. And that is that there was nobody to play with. You have to remember, the original game was set up on one GameCube. You could share the game disc around, but it was tied to whoever's memory card it was saved on. There was multiple character slots for people to make different characters of different races, but they were all tied to that one world. So everybody would come over to one person's house. Hopefully, they all had Game Boys to bring over. Because remember, this game controlled with a Game Boy Advance. So essentially then you would be making your lobby, and everybody would party up. Your caravan would go around, and then you'd enter the dungeon or town like normal. Your party was literally set by people coming over to your house. That was the party menu, everybody coming over. And it took an incredible amount of commitment. Everybody had to be together for the entirety of the game. Like for all the map moving, all the side storyline cutscenes. If you wanted to go into a town and like craft armor, everybody had to wait on each other. And the action-y part, which was everybody working together to get through a dungeon, was really the only part where you needed multiple people. By the way, I forgot to mention, Do not play this game solo. Do not play it with only 2 people. If you've never played this game or you've never heard about it before, it's almost unplayable single player or 2 player. The game revolves around this magic chalice that gives off this protective barrier. Someone's got to always carry this chalice around. So if you play it single player or 2 player, you're basically soloing all the bad guys by yourself. It takes away all the cooperativeness, all the chaining of the spells, trying to revive each other, working together. All of that is gone. And some of these bosses are pretty tough from what I hear. So Square Enix definitely realized this, and they wanted to try to create the biggest player base possible. So why not let everybody and anybody play? Just let anybody jump into anybody's match, which is what they've done. I have the full game, so that means you can download the demo version and pretty much run through the entire game with me. And then for the people who are going, boo-hoo, but I don't get credit for the drop of myrrh. It's like, well, you don't even own the game, so it doesn't matter that you don't get credit. And for the people who did buy the game, and yeah, it sucks that you have to run through it again, but I mean, this is how it was on the GameCube. All the characters were tied to one account. If I started my game up on my GameCube on my memory card, and you did the same on yours, they were 2 separate worlds, 2 separate caravans, 2 separate stories. There was no such thing as drop in and drop out, hop back and forth between each other's games and everybody get credit. That's just not how it was set up back then. And I don't think there was any possible way for them to do both. For them to make it free where anybody could jump in and play the game, and create this menu system where it was easy for people to jump in and out, and also create this cohesive world where one party could run through the entire game together. Because remember what I said earlier, in order to play this game originally, you had to have a group of friends who were ultra committed. They all had to meet at one place, have all the equipment, and if you wanted to beat the game, it was like 20 hours. Which of us have that kind of commitment? Like, even if you had the time to meet up and play it all in one sitting, your Game Boys wouldn't last because they would run out of batteries and have to be recharged. And don't even talk about creating a party system now where everybody's in the party together, traveling in the caravan together, because eventually somebody's going to get disconnected, and then what happens? I think this was the smartest and probably the only way to handle it. A way, albeit flawed, for everybody to finally experience Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles. Because that's the most important thing, right? Is that people finally get a convenient way to experience it. Because otherwise, this game has literally been sitting on my shelf for the last 15 years, untouched, unexperienced, and unfinished. So I'm super stoked. Now I have a way to play it. I have an easy way to get party members. Like literally, I've just been messaging my friends to download the demo copy and run a few levels with me. Like literally, I was streaming the game online last night with a couple friends. One of the viewers pops in and says, oh, well, this game looks pretty cool. And I'm like, well, we only have a party of 3. I mean, you can download the demo version and jump into our game right now if you want. And within 30 minutes, he was helping us run through dungeons and fight the bosses. Oh, and by the way, did I mention that I was playing the PS4 copy and he was playing it on the Nintendo Switch? That's right, it doesn't matter. PS4 or Switch, it's cross-play compatible. And you can actually transfer your memory data between the 2 systems. I mean, that's pretty cool. That's something that was definitely not available back then. And lastly, this game is ultimately about me. I bought the game, I'm interested in playing it. I was the one motivated enough to spend money on it, and I'm motivated enough to want to finish it. I've now been given a way to get through this game, so this is exactly what I want. Square Enix has basically solved the biggest problem with the original game. And again, that is that you couldn't find people to play with. It was a co-op multiplayer game that was difficult to get people to co-op with you. There was too much of a commitment and a barrier to entry. And if you're one of those people who are still complaining, then I have questions about how much you really actually care about this specific game, Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles, or you're just spoiled because gamers have it so good now, and the thought of having to run through this game multiple times does suck. But I mean, seriously, leave me a comment below. How many people are out there who purchased this game, are going to play the game with 3 other friends who all purchased the game as well, and they only want to run a full party together by themselves? And even at that point, I'm enjoying this game enough where I kind of want to run through the levels again to level up my character. So if Mr. Greentoast, who also bought the game, needs me to run it through with him so that he can get credit for the drop, I'm actually okay with that. Maybe I don't want to run the entire game with him, but certain levels or certain boss fights, I don't mind doing it again. I mean, that's kind of how these online co-op games are played anyways, right? You do boss runs. You help each other do runs in order to collect better loot. Again, I don't know why people are complaining. I saw some people complaining about no local co-op. I mean, what the hell? Which one of you guys are actually out there playing local co-op right now? I mean, that's one of the reasons why I haven't picked up a lot of these 2D brawlers that got released. Who do you have coming over to your house to play this game? Oh, and also, I think another reason is because this game originally controlled on the Game Boy. Everyone had their own little screen, separate from everyone else. So when you're like equipping items or changing spells out, it doesn't pop up on the screen and block other people's view. You could argue that they could come up with a way around that, like either have the menu pop up on screen, or use the PS Vita as a controller instead. But one, that's a lot of logistical work. When you open up another avenue, you open up other potential problems. And secondly, then getting everybody with Vitas to come over just for local co-op is kind of the original problem we had with the Game Boy Advances. So trust me, this is probably the most elegant, simple, and feasible solution. And for somebody like me, who always wanted to go back and play Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles, it is a welcome addition. I'm just happy to finally have the opportunity to play this game.